thank you all for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Hi, Mike. Hi, Ryan. I see you guys all there. So as you've seen, and we've been talking about our lovely weather, like Jen's enjoying her last, 3 weeks before winter sets in, or it happens in Missouri. But I am down in Key Largo, Florida, and we have fall. So it's lovely.
Enjoy it. And you have year-round nice weather.
That is true. We do. Every now and then we get a cold front, though, and iguanas literally fall out of the trees.
I need a picture of that or a video when it happens.
You have to move your cars. When we actually get a freeze and a cold snap, you have to move your cars away from the trees. Otherwise, like some of these iguanas are like 40 pounds. They will fall through your windshield. You'll wake up in the morning and there will be an iguana defrosting. They defrost, by the way. They don't die. They defrost and then they come back to life. It's like real life zombie apocalypse down here.
Things that never would happen in Missouri. Iguanas falling on my car.
It's an adventure down here.
That's awesome.
Not a lot of wildlife. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. We will honor your guys' time. Thank you again for all of you being here. We appreciate you. We're with Jen Davis, our Vice President of MAPS Coaching today, and we are going to talk about being the coach that our team members need. If you've got one employee, independent contractors that work for you, even somebody that you simply oversee or mentor, coaching comes into that relationship. And it doesn't always start with something that you understand as purposeful coaching. And Jen has gone on a lot of journeys, from coming into Keller Williams as a buyer's agent to lead buyer's agent, right? Now she's the Vice President of MAPS Coaching, also known as my boss. So we're going to talk to her about what that journey looks like. So Jen, tell us just a little bit more about yourself, other than the fact that you are in fall in Missouri, right?
Sure. So I'm in Springfield, Missouri. I still have a real estate team. So I'm still part of a team, Holt Homes Group in Springfield. I did start as a buyer's agent, and I have been with Keller Williams since 2012. So joined as a buyer's agent, and then spent 6 years kind of developing that team within a team model, right? I was running showing agents, inside sales agents on the buy side. I had an executive assistant, and then moved into an ownership spot within HHG. And then from there, got to be the vice president of MAPS. In about 2016, though, that was my first real experience becoming a coach outside of our team. So Tony DeCello had reached out to see if I would create, at that point, a fast track program around buyer agents and how do you leverage, how do you create a team within a team? What does the model look like? And then I was a group coach from 2016, I think, to 2019 when I became a one-on-one MAPS coach.
Awesome. So 2019, you became a one-on-one coach with MAPS. 2016, you started as a fast track and group coach. Tell me what it was like when you first had to start overseeing people in Holt Homes, and you were the coach to your team members before you were ever a professionally trained coach. What was that like for you? What was that journey?
So I think leadership in any capacity is interesting, right? I think it's a skill that we can learn and we develop, and every day we learn and develop it, right? We've never quite arrived. And I see leadership and coaching as pretty well interchangeable. The first time that I was coaching someone was really as a buyer's agent bringing in a showing agent. And the first round of it didn't work. I mean, quite honestly, I brought somebody in. I didn't really know how to coach or lead. So I knew how to do the tasks and the responsibilities, right? I knew how to hit a goal. I didn't have the transferable skill yet on how do I get somebody else to do it. So the kind of the I do it, we do it to the they do it space. And so the first round of it really honestly didn't go very well. I had somebody that was on our team for about 4 months and it fizzled out. And at that point, I went to my MAPS coach and I was like, hey, I want this to work. And I think I'm missing a piece. And so he really worked with me at that time to develop the skills around how do you hold someone accountable? How do you coach them? How do we show up as a leader in a way that gets the best results from people? And I think that's that learning curve, right? The beginning part of it is, I'm just going to tell you what to do and I want you to do it. When you move into coaching, it's how do I ask the question, or how do I create the environment that gets them to perform at their best?
It's interesting when you say that. It's how do I create the environment that gets them to perform at their best? And there's a definitive difference between telling somebody what to do and coaching them to be able to fulfill what needs to be done and to grow. It's the difference between management and leadership frequently too, right? Like we can manage somebody and tell them, here's what I need you to do. Here's when I need you to do it. Here's how I need you to do it. And this is the process to do it. And then there's coaching, which is helping somebody self-discover how to connect A and Z, right?
Mhm.
They get to figure that path in there.
I think the interesting part of that is how much faster they get there when it's them getting there instead of you telling them how to get there. Once it clicks and they unlock that kind of the magic, right? When they understand, okay, A connects to Z, and this is how I'm going to get there. What ends up happening is, number one, typically they have way more buy-in. They have more fun. You're going to have more fun, right? Everybody's working together. The second thing that happens is typically you're going to find some gaps in your system because somebody else that's going to go along and say, I'm going to get from A to Z, they may find some gaps. And as long as you're still in that mode of being coachable, as a leader, it gives you the opportunity to actually perfect some of your systems.
That's a great point, right? It's the side bonus there of you're going to be able to see these things that you didn't see previously and now make it a better system for the next person.
That's right.
So let's ask the uncomfortable question on it. Was it easy? Was it easy to go from peer to now coach and leader of people in that organization?
No, I think the first transition was we brought in a showing agent and that was my hire. The next transition was, okay, now I'm going to lead all of the sales agents that were initially, my friends, right? We would go out for happy hours and, we were in the sales competitions together. And that transition, I think it's never easy. It's never easy to move from somebody's peer to their coach. And I think the thing that we have to understand as a coach and as a leader is really understanding that that's a title that's earned and not given. So it takes time and it takes effort and it takes intentionality to get there. It was one of the hardest things I think that I've ever had to learn. And I do think that it's a skill that once you learn it, it does create that idea of being a little bit more humble in your everyday life, which then makes you a better leader in your everyday life.
One of our friends and fellow coaches, Jordan Freed, talks a lot about the practices he did in becoming a coach. And Jordan is one of the very few coaches I know that kept his question book. Right? Jordan still has his question book. And what a question book is when we start as coaches in MAPS, one of our best practices for becoming a great coach is write down questions every single day, right?
Mhm.
Just write it down. How many questions can you write down in a day? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 20 a week? Whatever it is, but it's writing down powerful questions. And people ask him all the time, like, well, can I have your book? Can I have your book? Right? Can I have your book? And while Jordan would never let the house burn down and have that book stay inside of it, right? Like he would risk his life for that book. That book is of no value to anybody else because it's the process of doing that activity that helped Jordan become an amazing coach that he is, right? That book is probably this thick. I've never laid eyes on it, but he promises and swears he still has it. And it's the process of that activity. And this is something we get asked a lot as coaches and as leaders is, well, can't you just tell me what to say? Like, can't you tell me what to do? And it's like, yeah, I can tell you once for this exact situation, how to navigate it. And you're going to forget it. It's going to
Mhm.
fall out of your head. It's
Mhm.
not an inherent skill. It's the act of
Mhm.
doing it, right? The process of learning to coach. How long do you think it took you from where you started being a coach with that first showing agent to the point where you said, okay, I can stand on my own. Like, I got this. Not that you were the world's greatest coach, but you felt comfortable doing it.
Oh, I think I 2.5, 3 years. I mean, I think that you look at it and you go, because there's so many missteps along the way, and some of them you don't even know are missteps until later. I think that's the biggest challenge with coaching is there's not a lot of direct feedback. You're looking at somebody else's results to see if you're connecting with them to get them on their journey. I think my comfort level was likely 2.5 or 3 years. And I think that that's just the learning curve of how do I learn to listen to the answer of the question as much as I'm listening to know what I'm going to ask next, right? I think that's that's the skill, is being in the moment with that person and it being their conversation and not yours, right? So I can remember Sajid saying to me at one point that his coaching calls, he measures the amount of time that he talks versus his coaching clients talk. And he wants to be under 8 minutes. And the amount of time that you have to invest in learning, right? How to ask great questions, how to ask the question that the client really will start unpacking in their answer to get to only talking 8 minutes. That's a skill that has to be developed over years.
Yeah. Joanna asked in here, she's like, what are the guidelines for developing a question book? The way we've always done it, Joanna, like, honestly, it started very organically. Like I said, Jordan kept his book. Mine was probably 78 different big size Post-its that were stuck different places as I went through it. Again, it's the activity, the thought process that does it. Like Jen was saying, what we would recommend, ask 20 powerful questions a week and just write them down. Really just start with 20. 20 might seem like a lot, 20 might not seem like a lot. But what I will tell you is that by the time you get to 11, it gets really hard. It's easy to ask 11 or 12 questions. When you get to 18, 19, 20, you're searching for more dynamic ways to ask things. Because, right, Jen, if I asked you, Jen, why did you do that? Versus, Jen, what caused you to make that decision on that transaction? Mm-hmm. Completely different reaction and thought process will come from Jen on that.
It is, Michelle Anderson is also one of our coaches. She still she emails me 50 questions every week. And I think hers started around the MREA. She was writing a certain number of questions per chapter, and then it evolved over time. And so, I think for the question of the guidelines, if you are like, I don't know what to ask questions of, start with your business, start with what's going on in your team. If you get through that and you're like, I still want to do it, I want to learn more, go through MREA chapter by chapter. What are 20 questions you could ask about that? And I think internally you start looking at it differently when you have to change it from I'm reading something to now I'm going to ask a question about it.
And I think one of the other important things to note on there is a powerful question doesn't ask why, and it doesn't end with a yes or no answer. So if you can avoid the word why and a yes or no answer, you're already on a great track to asking powerful questions. Now, a lot more learning that can go into it. Those are some good guidelines. So with that, Jen, where did you learn how to become a coach? Like, what were the resources you used, the books, the classes? You obviously said that you went to your coach. Where can somebody learn how to do this and be the coach their team members need?
So it started by first me having a coach, and then it went into some, I went to Coaches Skills Camp, and then I went to Advanced Coaches Skills Camp, which I think we've got one of those coming up. When I went to it though, I went to it thinking I'd like to be a MAPS coach one day. And when I left, I thought I need to utilize what I just learned in being a coach to my team. And it was very much how to ask questions, how to dig deeper. And the really interesting thing about that is not only did it make me a better coach to my team, it made me a better agent to our buyers and sellers. Because once you learn how to ask questions, any scenario you're in, you can get so much further, including parenting. I can ask different questions of my teenager than I think other parents can. And I've got the ability to connect with her at a different level. And we have a really strong relationship. That foundationally started for me learning how to become a coach and learning how to lead others. So I would say Coaches Skills Camp was one of them. Most recently, because I'm still learning, and I think you're still learning. I still am constantly looking at things and saying, how can I learn from this? Leadership Academy that Gary runs, that was something that as I've evolved from even just coaching one-on-one to leading other leaders, is in that class, he asks a lot of questions about how do we reflect on ourselves as a leader? How do we reflect on ourselves as creating an environment? And I think that most recently was the most impactful training I've been to, where I was like, this is that next level of questions of who you're in the room with.
And I believe he's running it in the first week of December, and then every other month in 2024, I think they are aiming for Leadership Academy.
That's right.
I'll tell you, great books too. Like I found a lot, like I read a lot. I read about a book a week, and that's a great resource for that as well. So as you guys are starting that journey, look at Coaching Skills Camp, look at the books that you're reading, look at the courses and the communities that KW already offers that are at your fingertips. You don't have to go outside of it and spend a fortune somewhere else. You likely already have these resources within your reach.
The other thing, Liz, I think to learn how to ask questions, I love to listen to podcasts that are interviews. So like for those of you that are listening to this right now, a great opportunity for this is actually listen to the questions that Liz asks, right? If you like to listen to Think Like a CEO, listen to how they go back and forth and what questions that Jay and Gary ask each other. I love at an event to listen to the interviewer. I'm after the question as much as I am the answer. And I think that once you start to dig into how do you unlock the answers that somebody else has, you become way more interested in the question.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I always ask folks when they go to an event, I'm like, well, what did you learn? They're like, oh, well, I learned this about how to sell a house like this. Well, what did you learn from watching the event?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at a different way. If it's not the material that was talked about on stage about affecting your business, what did you learn from the event?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What did you learn about the way people talk to each other, the way they positioned themselves, the way the questions were asked, right? And it adds a different dynamic of learning to things like that. It's a great point.
I think it's also just getting in the habit. You mentioned it earlier, the question book. You know, I had the opportunity to interview Tim Tebow when we were at Mega Camp, single-handedly one of the more nerve-wracking events of, present day.
Tim was awesome. And so were you. I loved Tim's session.
Tim was awesome. And when you're on that type of a stage, you become very aware of the questions you're going to ask, because the questions that you ask are going to impact the experience of the audience. And so I think that was as hard as I have studied questions in a long time. And it's a skill that you have to constantly be working at because it can get rusty. And learning that when you ask a question, the pause at the end of the question is as important as anything else. The number one thing that when I was learning to do this, and I still can do sometimes, is I'll ask a question and I almost start to fill in the answer. Or I drag the question on a little bit. And I think it's understanding how to ask the question and then hold.
Which is really common when we're not comfortable with silence and we're not confident in the communication back and forth with a team member, right? That drag where okay, well, let me help you solve it now. The question I just dropped on you is really, really common those earlier days in leadership and asking questions. You said in there just now, that it can get rusty, right? If you're not practicing this skill, it can get rusty. And you mentioned earlier, Michelle Anderson, one of our coaches, you said still sends 50 questions a week. Michelle Anderson's been a coach with MAPS, I think over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's been with us over 10 years.
Too.
She still sends questions every week, right? Like this is a practice, and she's a fantastic coach who is amazing at curating a conversation with questions.
And that started with Diana and went to Monica and then to me, regardless of who was in the role that I'm currently in. Michelle thinks enough of building and keeping that habit that no matter the environment, she has continued to say, not only am I going to write these down, I'm actually going to share them with someone. And I read it every week and they're all great questions. And it's amazing the questions that can stem from the next question, right? As you're looking through, you're like, oh, well, what? And I'll send her notes back like, hey, what do you think about this? Right. And it's when you're that dedicated to a skill and mastering it, that's when you have that exponential growth in talent.
I love that. It's the mastering of the skill.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come back to Holt Home Group, right? You guys grew quick. You had really good growth in that phase. And we can often see teams that their skill at selling real estate outpaces their skill at developing leadership because it takes time to develop leadership, right? We can hustle real estate for a good amount of time. You
Mhm.
master a listing appointment once, boom, you're there. Mastering leadership never really happens. And it is a hard journey of a
Mhm.
lot of time. And if you're busy selling a lot of houses, you are not always developing your leadership skills at the equal pace. So one of the common things we see is the team has gotten so big, and yet our leader skill is not quite there to coach,
Mhm.
or we have this massive business to now run, and we've got these great people who all need coaching and attention, but it's quite possible that we're not the right person for that. So I know with the size of your team, you've got multiple coaches that work with your team, right?
Mhm.
Multiple MAPS coaches.
Mhm.
How did you know it was time to leverage some of that off, and what caused you to make that decision?
I think that, Dan Holt, who's my business partner, I think mirrored it well for me. I think as a buyer's agent, when I got to, I don't know, 70 some closed units, Dan looked up and he was like, I've never closed 70 some buyers in a year. He was like, you need to get a MAPS coach, right? Dan had a MAPS coach. And so that was the first time I saw it. Dan was like, we need to get you a coach. So I got a coach. And then what happened is, as I was growing into that leadership space, what I noticed was there were specialty roles that were outpacing my knowledge of that side of the business. So if you look at a director of lead generation, right? I needed somebody else to coach that person on what should our systems be for building a lead flow? What should the systems be for, like, how does that person grow into that director space? And it had outpaced my knowledge of that role. And then it was on the director of operations side, when that person got to the space of, she's leading other people and she needs to be poured into, and she needs to know how to build a team within a team. Yet the metrics aren't the same for an operations person as they are for a salesperson. And so understanding the variety of different roles and what my skill sets were, I can coach agents and I can lead agents and I can talk about sales skills. On an operations side, though, where we want them to drive reviews and we want them to drive referrals, and then the lead gen side where we're saying we want, and we're going to hold the standard of, 92% set to held appointments, I need an expert in that field to coach my leader. And so it's recognizing, I think, the ceilings of what our knowledge base is and when it's best to bring in an additional voice. I also know that there are times that I can be the lid. I can be the lid on an organization if I'm not willing to go outside of what I know or our local market or what local trainings are. So I think the progression was I got to get a coach. And I understood what that did for my business. And then getting other individual coaches and then looking up and saying, this person is struggling with conversion. How do we plug them into maybe, a fast track program where they're actually going to be in a group of their peers learning this skill? And what ends up happening is they show up different for a coach, right? Somebody else's voice, even if you're saying the same thing, it lands differently.
It absolutely does. When you look at that, maybe the first step for leveraging some of that off is not the one-on-one coach, right? Let's say it's a small organization and you can still handle that and you're doing well to that point, but there's this other training or the group coaching atmosphere that is needed. It's a leverage point, right? Like that's just a leverage point on
It's
there to say, you're going to attend this and go through these learning lessons to give me an experience that I can coach you to.
Mhm. It's also, I mean, the easiest example is bold, right? I mean, it's 7 weeks of leverage of, your agents are getting their contacts in, their mindset is being reset. They also get that's the pour into them, right? I, I think that sometimes as leaders, we miss it when we get to go on all the trips and we get to sit in all the classes and we get to have a coach. Our team watches that, right? They watch it and they think, I want to have that. I can remember we decided that we needed a handbook, our team. I mean, this was early on and we needed a handbook, and that wasn't really my skill set or Dan's skill set. And so our director of operations, Monica, she at that point was our listing coordinator. And we sent her, at that point, Monica Reynolds did Priya, Perfect Real Estate Assistant in person. And we sent her there. That was more training at that point than coaching. It was, we're going to show you how to do it and help you build your systems. And that's the thing I think people need to understand. Sometimes we need the hands-on learning experience, and then sometimes we need that one-to-one coaching, and it's recognizing where you're at in your business and what that leverage point is that you mentioned that's going to give you the biggest impact.
That makes a huge difference with
Mhm.
it. And they're leverage points until it's time to really go for that one-on-one.
Mhm.
We've got like 2 minutes left here. What's your last thing you'd put a bow on it for everybody? Your mic drop moment, or your thing of, hey, this is it. Like when you're looking at coaching and becoming the coach your team members need, this is the most important thing to do.
You know, I think it's consistency. And I think as a leader or a parent, the hardest thing to learn is consistency, that I have to show up the same way every day, regardless of what else is happening in my world, right? So when I show up for a coaching client, I am going to be consistent. And you and I both know that we're going to start those conversations the same way every time. So whether you're looking at being a coach or you're leading somebody on your team, we always start with the same thing. What was the goal? What are your actuals? Where are we at? What got in the way, right? We're going through a coaching model, right? We're going through and we're talking through, here's what your goal was. Here's what you said you wanted before you started. Here's what you said you wanted before it got hard. And as your coach, I'm now your partner, and I'm going to take a stand for your goals, even when you're tired, even when you're frustrated, even when another deal falls through. And so I think as the coach or the leader, my number one piece of advice is figure out the regular cadence with your team. You have to meet with them once a week. You have to know what their goals are. You have to know where they're at. You have to show them you have to be the one to hold the mirror up to them to show them, here's what you said you wanted and here's where we're at. I think that is the foundation of it, is learning how to have that consistent communication with your team, asking those great questions, and then continuing to develop that skill.
I love that. And in the question book that we talked about earlier is a great way to start that coaching skills camp. So Jen, where can folks find more information about some of the things that you referenced? Because you referenced a couple of fast track programs, you referenced one-on-one coaching skills camp. Where can they find access to that?
If they just go to the MAPS website, mapscoaching.com, and also there's a lot of free resources. So, I mean, we have a daily role play that's free. I mean, that's on the MAPS Facebook page every day.
Yep.
It's free. So there are the fast track coaches, they do promotional events that are also free. It's 30 minutes of free content. And we have 2 or 3 of those every week. So understand that not everything needs to be paid, right? We want to meet you where you're at. So if you're ready for a coach, that's awesome. Let us know. If you're not and you just want to dabble in it, take one of our free classes and implement something. Don't take it just to listen, take it to implement something into your business.
Yeah. Listening with intent is the difference there. What do I have to get out of this 30 minutes that I'm showing up for to make it valuable?
Yep.
Right? This 30 minutes you've spent with us might not have been the most life-altering thing you've ever done, right? There might not be so many things in here you're like, oh my gosh, my life's on a total different trajectory. That's not the goal. The goal of this is, what's the one tiny little thing you took away from today that's going to alter your trajectory 1% into the right direction? And then the course next week that alters it 1% into the right direction. That's what the point of it is. It's not that something needs to be life-altering. What's the one little thing you're going to take away that's going to put you in the right direction? I know Angela has dropped a couple of links in there for some of the things that Jen mentioned for the MAPS coaching website. For those of you that we will see in Phoenix, I saw somebody on there earlier. Jen and myself will be in Phoenix next week for fall masterminds. We're super excited. I got my cowboy boots out for our Master A client event. Dug them out yesterday. So thank you all for you guys joining us. Jen, thank you for your time. I know 30 minutes is hard to spare for you, and we want to respect your time and get you out of here. If there's anything we can ever do for any of you on here or you, Jen, you all know how to reach us, and we'll be happy to help.